It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening and to welcome our moderator and panelists to this lab panel, which we've christened Spring into Tech, as both a nod to our season and a recognition of the opportunities that the liberal arts provide for moving into interesting and exciting careers in a wide array of technology employers. So our moderator this evening is Geoff Leslie. Geoff is a graduate of our English degree program, class of 91. He is the Senior Director of Field and Partner Enablement at DocuSign. And many of you probably know what DocuSign is. It's an e-signature and also a company also manages digital agreement processes. It's based here in San Francisco. I've gotten to know Geoff well because he has become a member of the School of Liberal Arts Dean's Advisory Board, which is focused on supporting and fundraising for the School of Liberal Arts, or SOLA, and the Liberal Arts Bridge Program. So thanks, Geoff, for agreeing to moderate. And in a few minutes, I'm going to turn things over to Geoff. Our panelists this evening are folks who come from a mix of majors and do a lot of interesting things. So we have Geoff Reimer. If you want to give us a little wave there, Geoff, awesome. Geoff is an alum of the communication program, class of 95, and Geoff is Director of Sales Engineering at DialPad. For those of you not familiar with DialPad, it's a digital phone and conferencing services company that's based here in San Francisco. Sandi Linden is also a communication alum from the class of 2002. And Sandi is a Senior Technical Education Program Manager at Workday. Workday provides a cloud-based ERP system. And for those of you who don't know what ERP is, it's a software that integrates various functions across an organization into one complete database system so that processes and information can be shared easily and streamlined. And we also have on our panel this evening, Michael Urbina. Michael was a double major in sociology and women's and gender studies, class of 2014. And he is an executive recruiter and the diversity team lead at Box. Box is a cloud-based content management and collaboration system. I'm really excited about these folks. They represent a range of decades and majors, and they're all working in different fields in tech. We may have, and we do have Erin Kinda has joined us. Yay, hi Erin. I'm sorry you can't see me, my video is malfunctioning this evening. Erin Kinda was on one of our panels a couple of years ago on the business of creativity, and we're thrilled to have her back. Erin is a graduate of St. Mary's class of 14 and was an English major, and she is a production coordinator at Pixar Animation. You probably all know Pixar. It's a computer animation film studio based right through the tunnel in Emeryville. So welcome to Erin and Michael and Sandi and Geoff, and to our host and coordinator of the panel this evening, Geoff Leslie. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Geoff, and thanks in advance to all of you for your contributions this evening. We are recording this webinar for those students who in the last week of classes are busy writing papers tonight and unable to join us live. So thanks for letting us do that. And thanks, Geoff. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks Sheila, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks Dana for getting this all set up. And first of all, I'd like to thank all the students for participating this evening. I know you have many options in terms of things that you can do now that you're in shelter in place in the evenings. So we're glad that you chose this as your option to spend a little time with us. And also, it's unfortunate, I was really looking forward to coming out to Moraga and doing this panel out in person, but I guess this being the Spring into Tech panel, maybe it's appropriate that we're doing this over Zoom. So, so you can get a little window into how we spend our day. I've been spending a lot of time in Zoom over the last several weeks, as I'm sure many of you have as well. So, so anyway, so thanks for joining us. Super happy to be here. So I'm going to try to keep things kind of informal. I know all the panelists and myself, we've been through a bunch of rehearsals to make sure that this is all really tight this evening. But I'd like to try to keep it fairly informal. So for those of you that are participating, if you have questions, feel free to enter those in the Q&A panel in the Zoom, and we'll do our best to keep up with all of those questions coming in. But to get things kicked off, I just have a couple things just to get things going here. And this being, I'm assuming some of you that are participating, you're seniors, you're graduating, or maybe I should say your fourth years, or whatever year you are, but you're graduating this year. So I'm going to hand it over to, I have a question for Michael, because I'm sure the big question in the webcast is, I'm graduating soon. What are tech companies looking for somebody who's graduating with a liberal arts degree? What kinds of characteristics are you looking for? What kind of jobs are out there for somebody who's going to be a soon-to-be recent graduate from St. Mary's?
Yeah, thank you, Geoff, and thank you for having me on the panel. So for context, I'm an executive recruiter at Box, as was mentioned in the beginning. So I specifically lead our efforts to hire executives, director and above, across all the different organizations that we have at the company. Now, to answer the question, so the first question that I actually get, I'm getting alums that are actually reaching out to me more and more as graduation date is getting closer. And one thing that I'm sharing with them is that, even amidst the pandemic, hiring is still happening 100% for a lot of tech companies. Yes, there are some layoffs that are happening, but for a very large portion of companies, they're still hiring in terms of sales, customer success, marketing, sales and go-to-market enablement, sales operations, engineering. There's tons of fields that are still, very well positioned in this type of climate to be hired. So in terms of graduates, what I would say is, first and foremost, that resume has to be airtight. And one of the first things that I always share is make sure that you're capturing your education as well as any internships and roles that you've held while at St. Mary's on your resume, and keep it to one page. Some recruiters have different schools of thought, but for me, what I always see and what always comes across my desk, even for very tenured senior directors, vice presidents, I still see one page in a lot of situations. So what I would say is, in terms of preparing for an interview, make sure that you're well prepared to talk about how your St. Mary's experience, and specifically like the classes that you took, the majors that you were decided to take, make sure to be able to translate that experience to what the job description entails. So in my case, for example, I was a sociology and women's and gender studies double major, and essentially in order to get the role that I did, I had to translate how the diversity concepts and theoretical frameworks that I learned would translate to essentially doing diversity recruiting at a tech company. So trying to find that balance of the schoolwork and basically talking about that in relation to the job description, balancing that schoolwork and then with any previous experience that you have, whether it be an internship or a summer job, all of that is going to translate well. And one last piece of advice that I would give, just because I'm in the field of recruiting, persistence is key. I encourage people that come out to, that reach out to me to apply in batches. Don't just apply to one job every single day and think you're going to get a hit. I would apply to a minimum of at least 20 jobs per day. and do that in batches so you get your responses from recruiters in batches. And it's like a law. If you're an executive recruiter, you are on LinkedIn as much as you're on Facebook or Instagram. So seriously, if you see somebody that is at a company you want to work at, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the recruiter directly with a specific ask. This is the position that I want to interview for. Do you have 15 minutes for a call?
That's some great advice, Michael, and thanks for that. I apologize for putting you on the spot first, but I suspect that there are a lot of folks that are participating tonight that's their top question, right? With everything that's going on in the world and the pandemic and the shelter in place, how in the world am I going to find a company that is hiring? So it's encouraging to hear you say that, there are companies hiring. DocuSign's one of them. We're hiring a lot of people, and I'm sure there are others in the panel that are working with companies in a similar situation. So it is very encouraging to hear that, despite what you might hear on the news and, the media, they sell ads and they sell newspapers with a lot of bad news, but there are a lot of companies out there that are still hiring. So just know that. So let's maybe go back to some of the questions that we had prepared here for the panel. Just now that we have some of that backdrop of, let's get that aside. People are hiring, so now, how do we get there? So, Geoff, maybe I'll shift over to you. So, tell us your story. How do you go from, St. Mary's liberal arts graduate to being a tech executive in a solution engineering organization? How did that happen?
Oh, it's been a fun road, that's for sure. I go all the way back to taking a class at St. Mary's in '94, taught by Professor Ed Twaniak, called telecommunications. I'm sure a lot of the communications people would know him. And it really changed my life. It was called telecommunications, and there was a lot going on in the telecommunications market with the Baby Bells breaking up, for those old enough to know who the Baby Bells are. But a lot went into that, and I kind of right there decided I wanted to go into telecommunications. I wanted to work in technology, and right out of the gate, that's where I went. I mean, I worked at a VAR, or value-added reseller, for 10 years, doing telephony, doing tech support, project management, anything I could do. And I think the important thing was always showing that, hey, I'm always working for that next job. I would just show everybody what I'm doing. And I ended up leaving there and going to very large manufacturers like a Nortel, Avaya, Polycom. I was doing video conferencing, 5 years ago, before it was even cool, right? And then kind of transcending that into software as a service. The market has changed so much from when I came out of school in '95, when it was all just wires and proprietary technology, to now I'm working at a company, we don't even have a hardware solution. Everything sits in the cloud. So you have to know software. You have to be able to adapt. One of the things, I hire lots of people, lots of engineers. I'm telling you, I am not looking for computer science, electrical engineers. I'm looking for like liberal arts, because they're by far the most well-rounded people. And when you take that from, especially, I'm in a sales organization, right? So my guys are the technical partners to the sales reps. They've got to know it all. They've also got to be able to sell. So it becomes I'm looking for 50% engineer and 50% salesperson. And if they're really good, you're not going to be able to tell that they're an engineer. So the one thing that I think that I'll just draw to is that coming out of St. Mary's and a liberal arts education, it made me so well-rounded. The people I interview people from St. Mary's as well as other WCC schools in the area, and everybody is so well-spoken, right? They can talk on so many different topics, and they're not just going to be speeds and feeds type of people that are just going to sit there and spit out numbers to you or just tell you how to fix the problem. They're going to work with you on a solution. And that's what I think it's solution, problem solving that liberal arts education gives you.
That's great, Geoff. Thanks for sharing that. And Sandi, from your standpoint now, you're running training programs at Workday. So how do you go from, similarly, a communications degree at St. Mary's, and what was your path that got you into tech and now at Workday?
Well, thank you for having me here. Actually very unconventional, and a lot of people look at my resume, and I'm sure Michael would look at it and be like, what the heck were you doing with your career path, and what were you planning on, where were you planning on ending up? So yeah, I started out as I graduated communications major. I went into working for a venture capitalist and helped him start a bunch of different companies, and we decided to start a property management company. He bought the properties. I learned how to run them. I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, got my real estate license. Very, unconventional, wouldn't put me in a tech company just by starting off with that. I did outside sales. I did internal communications, and then project management. And I think a lot of things is, a lot of how you end up where you get is connections. So I ended up at Workday because of a connection that I had, and pulled me into working there. Wasn't in my career path, so I would just say that I think a lot of people have this certain idea of where they think they want to end up and are not open to other opportunities. And my philosophy has always been like, I think things happen and present themselves for a reason. And so I've always been very open to taking different opportunities, even though it may not have been something that I was thinking I might want to do. So at Workday, I just came in there and I was like, yeah, I know nothing about technology from an engineering perspective. And now I'm leading and working on programs on how to train developers about technology, which makes absolutely no sense. So I think it's just keeping an open mind and knowing that your skill set can be transferable. It doesn't matter what you graduated in or what your major was. I think, a lot of things that we're looking for at Workday with our developers is we're looking for the soft skills. So people want to know, how do we train developers to be good communicators? How do we train them to be able to present and articulate what they need to share with others, which completely aligns with what I graduated with. My major is around communication. But not something that you would think about when you're thinking about a technology company. So it all applies, and there's an easy way to transfer it to whatever organization. You just have to kind of think it about and hone in on the different pieces, maybe step back for a second and kind of take a look at what the big picture is, and then figure out how your skill set kind of lines in with that.
That's really cool. Interesting path. I was not expecting the property management and real estate piece. So, but I'm curious, one thing that you did say, and I think just along the lines of what a lot of people want to know nowadays, is what's the secret to an effective job search? And you'd mentioned that you had been connected to Workday or with Workday through a connection that you had. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how that plays into an effective job search strategy?
Yeah, I think that as long as, anywhere you go, you can build different connections. The connection that got me into Workday, I met 20 years ago, and she was working, when I was working for the venture capitalist, she came right out of college, out of Berkeley, and she was working for his brother, who was an attorney. And we met there. She worked there for 2 months before she quit. I was still staying there, but we kept in touch. And so I think just those types of connections that you meet along the way, you might be a brief encounter with someone, but knowing that, you establish that relationship and that rapport so that if something does come up, you can reach out to them or they can reach out to you. And in this situation, she reached out to me, and I wasn't even in a place where I was looking at switching jobs. So I was, working for 24-Hour Fitness in the corporate office, doing program and project management for all of HR. And, she reached out and she's like, I'm going to be going on maternity leave, and I think you should take over my job while I'm out and then take this job once I come back. And I was like, fine, I will interview for this, but I'm not going to promise. I'm not excited about it like right now. But again, it's one of those times where you have to embrace the opportunity, and knowing that this was a good company. I mean, I'm so grateful to be there right now. And I feel very fortunate that that opportunity was handed to me, because I went in there full force, you know, I'm going to try and get this job, even if I wasn't thinking I wanted it. And everything kind of lined up for a reason. And so I just, again, I think it's really important to keep your eyes open to things that you might not think that you actually want to do, or if you think you kind of hone in on this one area and you're like, I only want to do this, I think you're really cutting yourself off from like a large amount of opportunities that could be a very great fit for you. So.
That's really great. And, you know, what that shows is, you know, you can try different things as well, right? You can try different paths, you can use different skills, and do some very different things throughout your career. And I just think that's a really great message for anybody, that, you know, just because you and I have my own stories that I'll tell, but just because it's what you do when you get out of school, it does not mean that that's going to be, you know, your set in stone path for the next, you know, however many years you're going to be working. So anyway, well, thank you, Sandi. Thanks for sharing that. And now I'm going to go to Erin, Erin, you probably work at like the coolest, closest to Moraga company, right? I mean, you think about it, it's like Hollywood, it's the coolest stories and animation that, you know, everybody's been watching for years, and it's pretty close to Moraga. So tell us how you landed at Pixar. What's been your path?
Well, I didn't know Pixar was that close at first, actually. When when I found out it was basically behind the IKEA in Emeryville, I'm like, it's been there this whole time. But my path is similar to Sandi in a kind of not what you planned on, but you just sort of took opportunities that seemed to make sense at the time. I was an English and theater double major, and I loved English, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be an actress though. So theater is that's my main thing. English was my fallback, which any person's who is an English major, who any of their parents are very concerned with that idea. So and so I tried out for a lot of plays, and I always made it up to the last minute, but I never got cast, or I was up for the lead and it just didn't work out. And so I was devastated, and I thought, well, this is the path I'm supposed to take. And it wasn't working out, and I was pushing and pushing. And then I was like, well, okay, what can I do instead, since this isn't working this semester? And so I started to take these other film opportunities or theater opportunities where it was either helping do some stage work, or people needed someone to help plan and organize a production that they wanted to put on in the quad. And I'm like, well, I can do that. I have that skill set. And then I always loved film and was super curious, and it worked in my English classes. So I took Lisa Manter's Hitchcock film theory and criticism class, and I just had a blast. I'm like, I cannot believe this counts as my credit for school. And so I just started taking advantage of opportunities where I thought that my path was totally crashing, and I thought my dream was over. And instead of focusing too much on it, I just sort of took whatever came down the pipeline. And one of those, because I wasn't cast in a play my senior year, I saw a job posting on Facebook to do kids' birthday parties. And so I said, well, I can act. Like, I do have a degree. I'm almost have a degree in it, so I might as well make some money. And I like Disney, and I want to, like, Pixar would be cool. So I started working as like a false Disney princess at kids' birthday parties on the weekends. And by the time I graduated, I had not had any internships. I'd had summer jobs as a waitress, but I loved the English major that I did choose, and it really challenged the way I thought, and I felt like I grew as a person from this degree. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I was like, well, I know I've matured, and I'm going to go out in the world and see what happens. And I sort of started to piece things together a few months after I graduated, and I was like, well, okay, so theater didn't work out, but I do love film. It's what I usually watch on my spare time. I'm watching all the extra DVD features or I've watched all the behind the scenes footage of Pixar and Disney and animated things, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just go learn how to animate, and that has to be the only way you can get a job at Pixar. And I'd applied a few different times to marketing jobs at Pixar and things that it was a real stretch, but I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And so, and they'd email me back, and they're very kind. They're like, we went with a different candidate, but thank you for your interest. And I was like, well, at least I tried. And so I was in the process of applying to animation school, and I'd gotten accepted. And then at the same time, one of my friends jokingly posted a link on my Facebook that was saying, here, Pixar's hiring, and she thought it was a gag link, and I clicked on it, and I read the job description, and it was for production, and I'd never actually heard of production. And I started reading the description of the production assistant role, and I'm like, oh, I've done all these things, and all of these extra roles I've taken, and helping kids put things on in the quad, or helping do things around campus. Like, I was in mission and ministry, so I knew how to plan events, and I knew how to put activities together. And so I just figured, well, I mean, I've gotten rejected before, so I'll just apply. And because of I took a class on how to create a theater resume, I put at the bottom that I could make balloon animals, because I could from my princessing job. And not a normal thing you'd put on a resume, but I figured, why not? And so as I was about to sign up for animation school, I got a call, and they asked me to come in for an interview. And then they specifically said, can you make balloon animals in your interview? And I was like, well, yes, I can. I put it on my resume. And so
I love that Michael's shaking his head. He's like, oh yeah, or he's nodding his head. He's like, oh yeah, anybody who has balloon animals on their resume is getting a phone call.
Yep.
Agree 100%.
So seemingly it felt like at the time I had no real trajectory. It felt like a lot of the things that were kind of my dream job, or sort of what Sandi was talking about, having a narrow focus of what I thought I needed to be doing. It ended up being all the things I did in my spare time, or really digging into the major that I just did because I loved it, but I wasn't sure what to do with it afterwards. And it was kind of a collective grouping of all these pieces that I didn't see connecting up until I got hired. And even now, as we progress, like, they need actors to help on a motion capture stage, and there's not surprisingly many actors at Pixar. And I was like, well, I can do it. And so I was able to act in a motion capture suit for, like, testing things and developing that. And that led to me learning how to run a stage at Pixar. And that was something I never thought I'd learn how to do or be interested in, but completely agree with Sandi, where don't get too narrowly focused on what you think you need to be doing, or the direction you think is the right direction, because sometimes it's all the opportunities surrounding it that just kind of fit together, and you won't know it until it's after the fact.
That's interesting. So there are two things that kind of caught my eye when you were talking about that. One was you really wanted to get on stage, and you would rehearse, or you'd audition and stuff, and you wouldn't get the part, but you persisted, and you stayed in the production and stuff, and got that experience. I kind of had the opposite experience at St. Mary's, where I took a play and production class with Barry Horowitz, who, I don't know if any of you remember Barry, but my full intent was I was going to be back office. I was going to be behind the stage. I was going to be doing lighting. I was going to be doing something that did not involve being on stage and saying things. However, he had a different idea, and so I ended up actually doing 2 productions with Barry while I was at St. Mary's. So maybe I should have gone into acting. I don't know. That, and the other thing was you were really creative in terms of bridging what you learned and all the different skills that you were exercising at St. Mary's into a role at Pixar, and being able to frame that in a way that it kind of fits into a production role at Pixar, which is I think that's one thing that people struggle with, is how do I go from what I'm doing here to having that fit into, these job descriptions that I'm reading, and it's not really a direct fit. And I think people get discouraged. I think they see these things, and they all say, you have to have at least 8 years experience, and you have to be able to do all these things. And it's like, if you go in and you impress people with the way you conduct yourself, and that you can help them bridge what you've been doing to the role that they're seeking to fill, sometimes that's what works. Especially if they like you, and so I think that's an important part of it. So I guess it's my turn. So just to give you just a little bit of my past. So I was an English major, graduated in '91, had a failed acting career while I was at St. Mary's, as you can tell. But I, out of school, it was similar to today, right? Maybe not quite as bad, but recession, job market was really tough. My first job out of school, I was selling door to door. So I was selling Arrowhead Mountain Spring water door to door to commercial accounts. And my sales manager's motto was door to door, floor to floor, store to store till there ain't no more. And, I was like 21, 22, and I was looking at him like, I don't even know what you said. And that's when he says, why are you still standing here? Go. So I did that for a year, just long enough to know that wasn't something that was my passion. I knew I could do it long enough and get some great experience, and maybe some of my acting experience helped just, because I felt like I was on stage all day, every day. But what I learned from that, and sometimes this can be as important as, finding something you really love to do, I knew that I didn't love doing that. It's just something that I didn't want to be doing all day, every day. So I took that experience, and I had some, back in those days, I worked on the ferry boats on San Francisco Bay, so I always had something I could fall back onto, and I did it in the evenings and weekends, and I could do it full time whenever I needed to make ends meet. But I landed it was a temp job at Levi's, the clothing company, in their communications department. And we were working on press releases, and I was helping them organize all their press clippings back in the old days before they had the internet and everything was on the internet. But I thought this was super cool. So I just went full on looking for communications opportunities, because it was all about writing. It was all about taking complex ideas and simplifying them and helping communicate things. So I landed an internship at Visa, the credit card company down in the peninsula, and did that for 6 months. Loved it. Got some great experience working on the Olympics and their different sports sponsorships that they do. So I had a really fun experience meeting the athletes and the coaches and things like that. So had a great experience. Didn't land a job at Visa coming out of that internship, which is fine. But I was able to transition that into a communications role at PG&E, which is the local utility here in the Bay Area. And what I didn't realize was I was kind of stepping into what was going to really kind of take me through my whole career. So it was back when companies were first basically replacing paper with these enterprise planning systems. So kind of like Workday, Sandi works at Workday, they do kind of HR-related processes. So this was the first time that PG&E had implemented this big software program called SAP that nobody had heard of before. So, and they brought me in to run all of the communications company-wide around their SAP implementation, which at the time, and I still think this today, I don't think the communications department that brought me in really understood how big a job that was going to be. And it was a true, you know, you hear this often, it was a true fake it till you make it situation where, you know, it was my role to make sure that all of the 23,000 people around PG&E that were going to have to transition from, you know, using paper and doing business, the old-fashioned way, and transitioning everything that they do all day long into computers. And so there's a big communications component to that, and there was a big what's known as change management component to that, which really, for me, turned into, hey, this is pretty cool. It's my role to make sure that people can do their jobs effectively, and that has really been kind of the lighthouse that has kind of guided my career since then. So as long as I'm in some sort of a role, whether it's strictly communications related or training or some combination of those things, helping people perform as well as they can in the jobs that they're doing. And that can be using a new system, it can be re-engineering business processes to be more efficient. It can be, nowadays it can be, companies are shrinking, right, and helping people understand in the context of this new world, how do we continue to work, which fortunately we're not shrinking at DocuSign, but we are helping our field employees, our salespeople, and our customer success teams learn how to work effectively remotely. So that's very quickly turned into a big part of my organization's job, is just making sure that people know how to do that. So that was kind of my path. I went from ferry boats to selling water to implementing large enterprise systems, and I've worked at a few software companies since then. And I did some consulting as well. I worked at Deloitte Consulting, which I've often told recent graduates that that's a great way to get into large organizations, understand how they work. You learn a lot about business processes and how different departments in an organization work together. So you get a lot of really great experience doing that. You meet a lot of people, work in a lot of different types of industries. So just in the period of time that I was at Deloitte, we did a lot of work with telcos and energy companies and some tech, some public sector. I did a great project up at the state of California. So whether it's a Deloitte Consulting or an Accenture is another one that's very successful nowadays. These companies do a lot of hiring out of undergraduate and graduate programs, and it's a great way to get that business experience. And it's these are really great logos to have on your resume as well, because companies seek out people that have that acumen, that level of business process experience, and you also learn a lot about working cross-functionally on project teams and project planning and getting things done, which those are all super important skills to have nowadays, is particularly in this connected world and work from home world. Your ability to work effectively with others, and particularly now when you're not in the same room with them, is super important. So anyway, so that was a little digression on consulting, but I always encourage early career people that if they're looking for that path, that's a great way to infiltrate companies and kind of understand who does what and learn a lot about how businesses operate. And today, I'll fast forward to where I am now. I've been at DocuSign now for almost 4 years exactly, and I'm in an organization that in the last, this whole area has just been defined in the last maybe 5 or 8 years, and it's called often it's called sales enablement. At DocuSign, it's a little bit broader. We call it field enablement, which means that we're responsible for onboarding and training for all of our customer-facing employees. So whether they're in sales or customer success, doing our support programs for our customers, it's the responsibility of our organization to make sure that they are all onboarded and get ongoing training on our products and our systems that we use. So again, kind of going back to that lighthouse that I'd mentioned, just helping people do their job, do it effectively, and having the right content and tools in place to help them do that. So that's where I am today. So I'm going to pause. I'm not seeing, let's see, actually I am seeing one question. Let me just see if we have a question here. And this is a question for Michael, which is good timing. So we're kind of going around the horn here. So this person has a question. They're a psychology major and a women and gender studies minor. And I'm interested in human resources. Do you recommend going to grad school to get a master's?
Great question. So I was actually going through the exact same thought process when I graduated. I wanted to pursue a doctorate in feminist studies and do it because I was just personally very passionate about the space. And then there's not many men in the space as well. So one of the things that I was adamant about in my early career was to use my male privilege essentially to advance social justice using the women's studies degree that I ended up getting. Now, to answer that specific question, so I think it really depends on what the long-term goal of your career is. If you're somebody that wants to, for example, go into consulting or do, executive level work in HR, I think that a master's degree is a very great thing to have under your tool belt. That being said, if you just want to get started in your career, I would equally advise, it all just depends on what you want to do. If you just want to jump straight into it, I think that the 2 years that you use in going straight into the workforce and going for that first HR coordinator role, HR analyst, recruiting coordinator, like one of those roles, you're going to get a lot of value and really learn on the job as opposed to going to a graduate school and then learning theoretical concepts, doing internships, waiting 2 years essentially to get into the workforce. I would really advise dipping your toes into the workforce first to see if you essentially need the skill set. I made the transition from the nonprofit sector into tech, specifically tech recruiting, without a master's degree. I just had my double majors in sociology and women's studies, and to be completely honest with you, the 2 majors that I essentially got were more than enough information. Frankly, in the recruiting industry, a lot of what women's and gender studies, what psychology, what sociology teaches you, it is so applicable to the space that frankly, like an undergraduate degree will more than do it. That being said, I've seen principals or managing partners, managing directors at consulting firms that have that advanced degree, whether it be an MBA, a JD, or a master's in psychology or women's studies, something of that nature, that then helps them in terms of consulting and advising clients, as Geoff was saying. So if you want to dip your toes in through the consulting route, I would highly recommend, a master's degree. I think that supplementary information is really going to help in terms of making you stand out versus other potential CEBA candidates in particular. And that's one last point that I wanted to make is CEBA versus like what the liberal arts degree can bring is, liberal arts majors can definitely go into business. There is definitely a path there. And when I first graduated, I didn't see it. I thought that I was destined for the nonprofit world. So I went to work for a domestic violence nonprofit. And it wasn't until I met a mentor of mine who introduced me to recruiting where I realized that recruiting is a space where you can essentially make long-term impact in an organization. And there's no diversity work happening. And if, there is, it's very little. So now in the 3 years that I've been in tech, I'm seeing so many more companies do a bunch of incredible work that's well-informed. And you can be part of that work without a master's degree is what I'm trying to say. So happy to follow up more, but that's what I would say to that question.
Can I add to that too? Because in the midst of my crazy career path, I also ventured into HR. And I went to Cal State East Bay has an HR certification program that you can go through. So if you wanted to go through a less expensive route, see if it's really for you, it would add something to your resume, give you a little bit more knowledge, and then you would have that to kind of take with you if you did decide to go to, further education, like with the master's or something like that.
Great, thanks, Michael. And there is another question here for Erin. There's somebody that is interested in working at Pixar, and are there certain classes that you would recommend for somebody that is interested in joining you at Pixar?
I think it's like the best and worst answer of not really. Which I guess to me was a highlight of like like I said earlier, there wasn't like a specific path of like, if I take these classes, I'll be a more competitive kind of candidate. It kind of evens the playing field in that sense, which at least in production, I think it depends on also if you're trying to become like a technical artist or an animator, or there's a lot of different jobs at the studio. And so in terms of what I ended up going into, which was production, it was more about the experiences I had rather than the classes that I took. And I definitely argue that the classes I took were super critical to helping me advance and get to a level where you're processing information faster, or you're coming up with more creative problem solving. And so for me, English was a really great track to do that. And it was the kind of challenge that I needed, that it helps me work with other people, and also be you're listening to, like, seminar is kind of a great example of classes that you're trying to listen to other people, you're trying to take in what they're saying, but also it may be conflicting with what you read or what you're thinking, and you're trying to work through a solution together. And so that's kind of I wish I had a better answer for you, that like, yes, A, B, C, and D classes would get you a job. But the great thing is that's not actually the case. It is kind of just the challenge, like it's you growing as a person in whatever degree you currently have.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Erin, that you know, it's not a specific class or series of classes necessarily. It's kind of the you know, it's the overall experience, right, of the coursework that you have, and the methodology, frankly, around, you know, the seminar and the small class sizes. And look, I mean, when you go out in the business world, that's what you're in. You're in a meeting and you're with, you know, 10 to 15 people, and you need to you know, help synthesize often very complex ideas into something that makes sense to the other people in the room. Or if you're, you know, I do a lot of writing and communications out to our field organization, synthesizing very complex information and sharing that out amongst the masses. And that's what you all do, you know, in the liberal arts program. I don't care if you're an English major, communications, women and gender studies. It's, you know, that's really the net of what you are doing in your coursework. So, you know, I would even say if there is something that's super technical that may differentiate you for a specific type of role, maybe that's even something you can do externally, right? So whether that's through volunteering or through an internship, that would give you that specific skill that might differentiate you. But I feel strongly, just, you know, having been out in the work world now and worked with a lot of people that can't write, a lot of people who can't articulate their ideas in meetings, that you know, what you are learning at St. Mary's, while often it may seem a little, you know, outside of what you think you might experience in the business world, it really does translate well.
Just real quick, just to add on to that, Erin, because it's funny, when I first went to St. Mary's, I wanted to be in film, and I took tons of film classes at St. Mary's. I was in production, so we had the Disney truck, and we would do all these great pictures, and I worked at KSMC, and so my emphasis was actually in audio production and video production, and I worked at Lucasfilm with people, and I did all these things through internships, and really what that just gave me was technical aptitude. It wasn't, I use those things I did today. I'm not making productions and but I know how to talk to people and I know how to manipulate things technically, and just that broad education, and I can communicate and I can stand up in an auditorium in front of 1,000 people and sit there and talk and be confident. All those things just along the lines of my major helped me get to where I am today.
That is great.
Sorry, I just want to add one little
Go
piece.
ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Michael.
One quick piece to what Erin said. I think, you know, if you insert X company into that question, if you want to work at a specific company, I think one thing that I've found to be very successful, and one thing that I've seen in grads that reach out to me, is really leveraging the St. Mary's network. There are a lot of Gales in tech in so many industries right now. So it really is about the strength of your network. So I really would encourage, you know, not more so around like taking certain classes. You know, I think the classes, you know, as Geoff and Erin were saying, like, you know, it will definitely, like, you know, help you in the long run of your career. But combine that with like a really strong network and you'll be deadly. You'll be able to get that job and have an in instead of just never making it past that application screen.
And kind of on a similar thought, it's taking like research and learn the company you're applying to. Like, it is taking those skill sets we're talking about where you can apply to whatever X company that is either your dream company or it's a company you really want to work for, but you really need to learn what the company is, even besides the product they create. And I think that was, at least in my life, that was the biggest shift I had to take coming out of college when I was applying to jobs. Was I feel like I was applying to the product rather than the company. And it wasn't until I started actually reading, like I read Ed Catmull's book. And if you're the founder of a company you want to work for wrote a book, read it, because usually it'll give you a good insight, at least into the values and what they look for in their candidates, because they're not trying to hire fans of what they create. They want you to love what you create. And I think that's like the win-win if that is the case, if you get hired there. But really it's even taking that skill set of research and learning how to figure out all of your sources and put it together. And that's kind of what your cover letter ends up becoming, is the research you did on the company and why you believe that you're a great asset that fits right into what they think.
That's a great point, Erin. And, you know, the point about your CEO, if they wrote a book, read it. You know, if the company has a YouTube channel, go watch the videos. If, you know, just go look at their recent press releases. Maybe they just purchased a company. Maybe, you know, be sure you're up to date on the latest news with that company, because these things may come up in your interview, and you want to at least sound like you have an understanding of recent events with the company. So along those lines, Geoff, I'm gonna jump to you for a second. In terms of your experience of looking for new roles, and what advice or best practices or things have you done that you think make a job search effective?
So, you know, the foremost thing for me, I think, is just passion. I'm very passionate, and I like that in people I'm hiring. I want to just kind of feel the passion. I think, you know, it doesn't matter what your degree's in, as long as you finish. And me as an executive that's hiring people, as long as you finished, I know you're going to follow through on stuff. You're not just, so if somebody has dropped out or didn't get a degree, the question's going to be, well, why didn't you finish this type of thing? So, but, you know, across my searches, I mean, I've hired people from multiple areas, and it's not, like I said, they're mostly not technical roles. I mean, not computer science, not electrical engineering. It's people that have like fine arts majors, and English majors is huge. People that can communicate, right? That have this little passion for technology, and that's where they fit in the mix. So, I mean, I think from a best practice, when you're looking for a job, it doesn't have to be in your field. Don't pigeonhole yourself into, I majored in this, so I majored in history, so I need to be a history teacher. right? Or I need to go get a law degree, right? It doesn't have to be like that. You did something you were passionate about. You've gone to school now and you've seen all these other avenues. It's your first job. No one expects you to have the experience. So kind of try to work those things, those internships or those other experiences, like Michael said, where you can kind of tie what the classes you've taken, the experiences you've had at St. Mary's, tie those into kind of working for that field you want to get into. I mean, it's going to be entry level anyway. And all you have to do is just continue to prove yourself. Just let your work speak for itself, because that's how things get done. That's how you move up. It's just people trust you, they go to you, and they continue to go to you. And an opening comes up. I didn't ask for it. They're just coming and going, hey, we have this new role. Would you like to interview for it? Those type of things. So long story short, just be passionate and be passionate about what you're choosing. Don't just do it for a job.
Awesome advice. So Sandi, I'm going to jump to you. Similar question. So what do you see that's worked for you and for other people in their job search that you would pass on to this group?
I think, in my job search, like I think I said before, is just being kind of open to different things that could apply to who I am as a person. I did, like you, do outside sales for a year, and also knew that was not for me. But, I didn't know I wanted to do it, but I was looking for a job. And in the interview, he said, well, how do you know that you can sell? You've never done it before? And I took my Razor flip phone and I flipped it open and I said, well, I have friends. You can call any one of them, and I've sold myself to them as a friend. And he just looked at me like, what are you talking about? I still got hired. And then somebody that I was selling to offered me my next job, right? So it was all just based on what you do. I would also say that at Workday, when I first came in, I was running what we call Generation Workday, which is a new graduate program. So new graduates come in as entry-level developers, and they go to a rotation program. And so that was what I was taking over temporarily. And so I managed about 30 GWs plus about 30 or 40 interns in that first couple months I was there. And I would just say, coming into a new organization or any organization, just be open and ask for feedback too, because that's what's going to help shape you, and that's going to help you stand out. Like if you're working and you just started this new job and you go to your manager after like a month and say, what could I be doing better? Like, what do you want to see more from me? And take that feedback seriously, you're going to stand out to be the next person that they want to see move forward, because you're actually being open and wanting to take things seriously. So again, like Erin said, and I think Michael said, I can't remember who said exactly what, but just, the network piece that you have from St. Mary's alumni, research those companies that you're interested in, and don't get hung up on like the brand name companies either. There's so many great companies out there that aren't they don't have the huge name attached to them. They're still awesome. And, those are going to be the things that kind of help you, find what you want eventually. Know that you're starting out, you're getting your experience, and take it every opportunity for what it's worth, and just take it with a passion. Like Geoff said, be passionate about what you're doing, and you'll shine through. Those people that follow through and actually can commit and do what they say they're going to do and stand by their word, I think those ones really stand out a lot of times to a lot of people as well. So those things have helped me, but it did take a little bit of learning also, really kind of researching companies and not just applying to jobs that I thought, just for a job, even though at times that might be what position you're in. And at that time you can take advantage of something, even if it is just a job, you still can take advantage of it and help you launch your career, because you'll be gaining a new experience. So I think everything's just how you perceive it, your perspective.
That's great. And, I would just, everybody's touched on things that I completely agree with, and just to get just really tactical too, right? So tell everyone you're looking for a job. Especially now, don't be shy. This is no time to be shy in your job search. I see a lot of LinkedIn posts nowadays from people at companies like Airbnb, and I had friends who were at a company just specifically tied to the business travel industry. So my LinkedIn feed is pretty full of people saying, hey, bad news at my company today. I'm looking for a new job. So don't be shy about telling people you're looking for a job. I know it can be scary, but I can assure you that everybody gets it right now. And if you're talented and you have that passion and you have a great attitude, I'm a big attitude person, that'll get you in the door. And just don't be shy. And also, be specific. I have a lot of people coming to me now and even before the crisis that we're in now, looking for roles at DocuSign. Hey, I'd love to work at DocuSign. Well, what would you like to do? Do some, to go back to Erin's point about doing some homework. So go to the website, come to me with a role that looks like it might be a good fit for what you want to do. Don't, make it easy for me. I'm happy to help people, but I'm not going to do your homework to help you figure out what's going to be a good fit for you at my company. So, if you go to your uncle or you go to your neighbor and they're at a company that's a target for you, do your homework, look at their website, look at their YouTube channel, go to their Snapchat, learn as much as you can, and be specific when you're approaching people. And I would also say, if you are not actively working your LinkedIn, I've had people ask me, is it important to have a LinkedIn profile? Yes. Michael is nodding his head. Yes, it is. We use those, don't we? So if you don't have an active, up-to-date, even kind of curated LinkedIn profile, then you are not differentiating yourself. And I see some amazing work being published by college students and interns that they're publishing on their LinkedIn profile, and frankly, it puts me to shame. The kind of the kind of stuff that they're curating and the brand that they're building around themselves coming out of school, it's very impressive. So if you're not doing at least the basic maintenance of your LinkedIn profile and presenting yourself in a very positive way, that will hurt you, because there are some people out there that are really differentiating themselves and getting very creative out there. So, I think all of those things certainly help. So with that, is there anything else anybody would like to add to that? Erin, I don't want you to feel like I shortchanged you on the job search tips.
You're all good. I would just add, going off of that, if you're going to reach out to people as well, like through LinkedIn, and even especially if it's alumni you've never spoken to or anything, I notice when I get reached out to by students who have done their research and who haven't, and usually it's someone who's saying, hey, tell me what it's like to work there. And I'm like, well, I have to go back to my job. I don't have time to write. I don't know what specifically you want to know. And it's, even though they went through the effort to reach out, it's so hard to really figure out, I don't know how to answer your question. And I want to help you, but also I don't have time. And this is your job right now, is to do the research and figure out what questions do you have, or do you not know what questions you have and you want to start a conversation. But I've had other students email me and they have very specific asks, and that's when the conversation really starts going, and that's when it's interesting, and I get to learn more about you, especially if I've never met you. I get to know kind of where your mind is at. So I think especially if you're going to make that step, which is a great step to make, to reach out, then make sure you're asking, even if it's 2 specific questions. It doesn't have to be a whole list. It can just be, hey, I've read this about such and such company. I was wondering how you feel about that. Or I'm curious about this part of the job. Do you work 7 days a week? And things like that are always really helpful to get conversation going.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, bring something to the conversation. Come up with a few questions. It could be simple stuff like, hey, I read so-and-so is a competitor of yours. What do you think of that? Just something that it's not just, I loved your example. What's it like to work there? Today? Anyway, great answers. And just to start wrapping things up a little bit, and for those of you that are watching online, again, feel free to post your questions either in the Q&A panel, and I see there's some questions that have come in through the chat as well. So whether it's through the chat or the Q&A, start queuing up your questions there, and we will definitely leave some time for questions. And I don't know, maybe let everybody go a little bit early. So, so why don't we jump to Michael? And this is just kind of a basic question, but if you had one piece of advice for graduates entering the workplace right now, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. My biggest piece of advice, and this comes from experience, from my own experience, and that piece of advice is basically don't put so much pressure on yourself with the first job that whatever job you get right out of college is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Like, don't put that much pressure on yourself. Everybody on the panel, including several alumni that I personally know, have made pivots in their careers. So I really think that being kind to yourself in the beginning is extremely important. And just because you don't land that first, dream job role right out of the gate does not mean that you're going to end up there. What matters is what you do when you are at that first role. As I forgot who said it, but basically, what you do when you're in a role to set yourself apart, is what helps you in terms of, opportunities coming to you. One piece of advice that somebody gave me is the only role that you should ever apply to is your first one. And following that, everything else should come from your network. So basically just continuing to build that network is extremely important. And sorry, I'm going to cheat. One other piece of advice that I'd give is, and I think Sandi was, mentioning this earlier, is, don't necessarily go to a company just because of the notoriety. I made that mistake by thinking, oh, I only can do Facebook or Google recruiting because those are the only two that, would look good on my resume. For me, what I found to be very successful is going to a company because I clicked with the manager. If the manager that you interview with is invested in your career and you end up working for this person, that person is going to influence your career much, much more than the notoriety of one small stint that you did at Google. My own LinkedIn is an example of that. I came in as a coordinator at Box, and my manager is the one that saw my diversity background through the liberal arts program here at St. Mary's. And because of that, in 2 years, I've essentially been able to run diversity recruiting at the executive level for a 2,000 plus person company because of my manager. So those two things are what I would say is manager, prioritize that, and then also essentially be kind to yourself with that first role. Those are my two pieces of advice.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. Great advice. And I will jump to Geoff. So same question. If you had a piece of advice for a new graduate, what would that be?
I would say similar to what I was talking about earlier, push yourself to keep growing, right? Show the employer, whoever your first employer is, that you have that drive, that you volunteer for things, right? It's stepping out of that comfort zone and showing them who you are and letting your accomplishments speak for themselves.
That's great. Thanks, Geoff. And Sandi, what would be your piece of advice for a new grad?
I agree with what Michael said, that whole piece about it being your network. So just take advantage of what's out there for you. St. Mary's has a huge network and it's a great community to pull from. I feel very fortunate for that. I think that a lot of the connections that you've made, whether they're friends or roommates or teachers. Like those are the people to really make sure you stay in contact with, and just think through how everything that you've done in your life could apply to a new job. Like I said, when I pulled out my phone, I was selling the fact that I could be a friend to somebody that I wanted to go out and do outside sales for. Didn't really make any sense, but to me in the moment I connected the dots and I was like, yeah, I'm so proud of myself for this example. And I was so passionate when I said it, like, Geoff, you would have totally hired me. I was so passionate. So just, keep in mind that some of those small examples are like things that you've done in your life. It doesn't have to be completely related to exactly school, but it can be related to just who you are as a person and the types of things that you do. And like how Erin said, she liked to organize things, and she wanted to, do the kids' birthday parties. Like that to me is just amazing. I think it's a great example of how you can take something that you're passionate about, make fun, and then also make it something that you could develop your career into in that same path. So just again, yeah, be passionate and be open.
That's great. Thanks, Sandi. And Erin, same question. What would be your advice for a new grad?
I think kind of going off of the be kind to yourself, I got a lot of job rejections when I first went out and started applying, and I got far in some of them where I thought they were going to hire me, and then I just would get a no. And I think, especially being on the other side of it now, I've realized that a lot of the time it has nothing to do with you. It really has nothing to do with you and your skill set and your personality. Sometimes it is solely based on the people that are already there. If there's already a balance in the group and they kind of need someone that is this way, it doesn't mean that you aren't so qualified and you wouldn't have killed it in that role. It's just sort of the circumstances of that timing. And sometimes the timing works out perfectly, and then other times it doesn't. And I think it's just keep remembering to be kind to yourself, and don't let the rejections feel like a self-reflection on you, because it really isn't. It's business at the end of the day, and sometimes there's logistics that you will never know that are happening behind the scenes. And I think it's really, that's something I wish I would have known when I was first starting out, because I think I did take a lot of them personally, and I thought it was something I did wrong, or I chose the wrong major. And I feel like it's important to remind ourselves that we didn't. And kind of like everyone else was saying, is just stay curious and like keep exploring. When you do get those rejections, sometimes that's the time that you go become a party performer for kids' birthday parties because you need a distraction, and that's fun for you. So I think just stay curious and don't box yourself in. Like, curious about everything. Just because we're liberal arts doesn't mean we can't learn how to code or can't learn new things. So that's my advice.
That's great. And I'm sure at least 2 of the participants tonight are going to learn how to twist balloon animals just to have that on their resume. So that will be a big differentiator. So, I would have to echo what a few of the panelists have said here. And one that Sandi had mentioned is, leverage the resources that you have available to you. And I see Paula Conrad is on the webcast, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Paula and the career, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, or the name wrong, but the Career Center at St. Mary's. Paula has great connections into Bay Area companies for internships and for full-time roles. So I would highly encourage that you take advantage of the resources that you have available to you at St. Mary's and the networks that you have out in the business community as much as you can, particularly in today's business world. And for those that that can afford to do these kinds of things, heck, try to get some volunteer opportunities to build up those skills, or take those internships. Maybe they're not paying as much, or maybe not at all. But if you can afford to do that, great. And when you land that job, I think Geoff touched on some of this. Say yes. Sign up for things. And not only say yes, but say yes, and here's what else. because it's those interns and it's those early career people that I'm seeing, particularly at DocuSign, that become indispensable. And that's really what you want to do is, you want to lean in, you want to get stuff done, you want to look for ways to make yourself indispensable. And so, when your internship is up, or when and this is happening more and more today, when they're looking around to figure out maybe who's not going to make it, then there's no question they're going to keep you because you're indispensable. So that's becoming more and more important. So sign up for things, and when you're early career, just say yes, take it on. And that's where you learn all of the other things that may be particularly interesting to you. You might, again, going back to what a lot of people have said, you might think I wanted to go in and be a sales enablement person, but once you get into sales enablement, you realize there are all these other great things that are going on in the company because of all the things you're getting involved in. So those would be my two things. Leverage your resources that you have available to you, and when you do get that break, lean into it and say yes, sign up for stuff, and then get it done, follow through. So with that, I'm going to check the questions. I don't see any new ones here, but I'll check the chat to see. Looks like Dylan had a very specific question for Sandi, which was addressed online. Sandi, do you want to build on that question at all? The question was about being a financial analyst versus working at a venture capital firm. So I don't know if there's anything else you would add to that here for the broader group.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, his question was very specific as to if it would be very much just plugging numbers all the time and being venture capital. And the answer that I had was no, it wasn't. It could vary depending on where you're at, but for me, it was not. It was a lot of very random things that I also had to learn as I went. I came into, this is one of those things, is I was a nanny for a family while I was at St. Mary's, and then the husband was a venture capitalist and offered to match any job offer I got when I graduated from college to work for him. And so coming straight out of college and working for a venture capitalist, he said, hey, I want to create, 5 different entities, and I want to start, I want to purchase these properties, and I want to dissolve this business. And I was on the phone with the IRS for like 4 or 5 hours because I'm like, how do I dissolve a business? These things you learn. So my time working in that was not plugging numbers, and it was not at all completely just, data entry or analyzing it all. It was very much, for me at least, budgets and finance and that kind of stuff. But a lot of the other pieces were not at all around that. So, again, one of those things you learn that experience and, and take everything you can from it, because I've been able to build on that in terms of my career. It was not what I thought I was going to do. Graduating from St. Mary's, it had nothing to do with my major, but a lot of the versatility that you learn, because St. Mary's gives you so many different things that you're required to do, so many different things as part of liberal arts. It gives you that versatility to be like, okay, I know how to figure this out. I'm gonna go get this done, and I don't know how I'm going to get it done, but I'm going to get it done. I'm going to do it the right way, and I'm going to be confident and proud about what I've done. So just ties back to that community and the education that we get and what this offers us overall.
Great. Thanks, Sandi. So are there any more questions coming in? I don't see anything. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Nope. I think we're ready to close it up, Sheila. But I'd like to say thank you for having us. Thanks for having me. This has been a real pleasure. Again, I wish we were in Moraga under very different circumstances, but I'm glad that we're able to do this tonight. So thanks, everybody, for participating. Thanks to the panelists. And with that, I will hand it over to Sheila.
Great. Well, let's hope my video hangs on for another 25 seconds. I don't know what my technical difficulties are tonight, but it's good to see you all. Thank you, Geoff, for moderating this great discussion. And thanks to Geoff with a G, Sandi, Michael, and Erin for contributing. Your stories are really inspiring, and your advice and insights really helpful, timely, practical for our students and possibly some alums listening in tonight or to the recording as well. Thanks to Paula in Career and Professional Development Services, CPDS, to get the acronym there, for helping us connect with you all, and to Professor Dana Herrera, who is the lab program coordinator. Lab is the Liberal Arts Bridge, which I mentioned at the beginning. If you are listening in and you're a current student and you're a major in the School of Liberal Arts and you haven't already signed up for the lab program, if I get my video to click in for 2 seconds, I'm going to try to share my screen. Oh, I can't share my screen because I've not been enabled to share. Oh well, didn't think of that. Well, go to stmarys-ca.edu/thelab. Easy to find, a shortcut. Check out the lab program. You can sign up. You can earn a certificate of career readiness. You can qualify for some scholarships that we offer for internships with nonprofits or public sector employers that would otherwise be unpaid or underpaid. I see Diana Carey is in the audience this evening. Diana was one of our scholarship winners last summer, and was to have another opportunity with the same employer and a promotion this summer. Unfortunately, it's been put aside because of the COVID. So clearly Diana's exploring her other opportunities. I'm glad to see that, as are our other folks in the audience tonight. If you haven't connected with Dana through the lab program or with our lab internship coordinator, Professor Zara Ahmed, I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to reach out to our panelists on LinkedIn and connect with them. And if you have specific, interesting, and easily answerable questions, as Erin suggested, I'm sure they'd be open to those. The kind of thing that, you know, they can provide some insight on that isn't going to take all afternoon to respond to. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your love for St. Mary's, your commitment to our students and their success. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and have a great evening, and take care and be well. We hope to see you all in person before too long. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again. Good night.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, everybody.
Be well.